In fairness, we should take up some of the arguments of your critics, because your book, other publications recently have really revived the debate about, and as people look back retrospectively. In particular, you have your new book is out. Elizabeth Warren has her book out, and they have diametrically opposed views of what this was all about, what happened. She writes that, quote, "You believe the government's most important job was to provide a soft landing for the tender fannies of the banks. Big corporations hire armies of lobbyists to get billion-dollar loopholes into the tax system and persuade their friends in Congress to support laws that keep the playing field tilted in their favor. Meanwhile, hardworking families are told they'll just have to live with smaller dreams for their children."
Well, I write in the book with some admiration for Elizabeth, not just because of what she did with this, with me and with the president on the cause of consumer protection, but also how she spoke about and how she still talks about this set of broader challenges facing the country. And she gives voice to a view about this country and the role of government that I have a lot of respect for, enthusiasm for, support for. But she does represent too, and she did at the time, still does today, this view which many people held, which we were motivated by a set of desires and objectives that were confused, mistaken, if not venal. And I think that critique, I want to attribute it to her, but I think that critique of the president and the people around him, I think is deeply offensive to them, because although again, what it was necessary to provide a more just outcome for the innocent victims of the crisis was going to look offensive on its face. It would be nice if something would be possible without that. The people who helped shape that were motivated only by, and remember, he's a Democratic president, elected with a very substantial mandate, surrounded by some very talented political people, some way talented legislative people, and a pretty interesting mix of progressive economists. They're motivated by one thing, which is what's going to be the most effective path to reduce the risk of more unemployment, maximize the chance people get back to work. That's a completely progressive value motivation. And the idea that there was some different motivation coloring our judgments is I think deeply unfair. And although you could say maybe understandable, given that on the face of what we did looked like we were rewarding the arsonists, but it's also based on I think a deeply maybe understandable confusion that somehow there could have been better outcomes for the average person if we just step back and let the system collapse. And I think everything we know about crises and panics in history, and it wasn't a hypothetical thing, was that the damage to those broader progressive values and interests would have been terrible if we'd stepped back and let the system collapse.
But could you have done more?
And could we have done more?
Could you have done more for Main Street?
The tragic thing was that we were unable to relax the political constraints that we faced in legislating more stimulus, more benefits, longer. And this president was very successful in getting that initial powerful package of things, again, larger than what Roosevelt did in the Great Depression in relative terms, and asked for substantial additional chunks of authority over the succeeding years. But we got a fraction of those things through Congress, another $600 billion through Congress. Not enough, though, to compensate for the huge drag, huge pain on state and local governments, and not enough to compensate for the huge loss of demand. And that failure to relax those constraints was very consequential because fiscal policy turned too tight too quickly, and the country got caught up in this little fever about austerity enthusiasm too quickly. But I say this because that was the constraint. If we'd been able to relax that constraint, then this would have been a stronger recovery, and we would have healed more of the damage more quickly. But again, it wasn't because the president was frankly worried about anything except for how to limit the damage. And you could say that we were ineffective. It's true, we were ineffective in relaxing that constraint, getting more out of Congress. But if you look at the record of what he proposed, what we proposed, and what we pushed, you can see he was worried about the right thing, and that would have made a material difference.